Welcome back to Digitally Transformed. I'm your host, Melissa, and in this podcast, we discuss innovation, cybersecurity, data, business technology, machine learning, and technology in general as it revolutionizes the way that we work and do business. I hope that you enjoy this week's episode. Hello and welcome back to the podcast. Today we are talking about what a decentralized identifier, a DID, is. So let me give you an example. When you log into an account with Google or Facebook, you're using an identity verification through a central intermediary. And sometimes it can feel convenient to log in with these accounts, but it does have a privacy concern. These are large intermediaries that gather metadata as you're using that account. Things like when and how long you used it, where you were located when you were using it, and many just other online activities while you're engaging during that time. Now, this information is usually used to create targeted ads for you, and it can be really surprising how quickly you start to see those ads for an item, as in maybe even just a few minutes after. When you looked up your activity that was being monitored, these ads are relatively innocent, really, compared to other possible uses of this metadata, such as interference in elections or other things. But really, these DIDs, decentralized identifiers, can provide a really different credential checking method that does not rely on intermediary. So let's talk about how decentralized identifiers work in the first place. They are one of the components of a self-sovereign identity, or otherwise known as SSI, which allows for controllable and cryptographically secure identification without going through a third party. So instead of passing through a verifying intermediary like Google, DIDs are stored on an immutable blockchain. And individuals or organizations can really just create as many DIDs as necessary, and these can be used in different contexts wherever identity verification really needs to be done. There are dozens of different DID methods that can be used to create a decentralized identifier, which, the process does require coding. Each DID is essentially a code that is comprised of a scheme, a method, and a method-specific string. Once the DID is created, a party can exchange them to create secure connectivity between them and confirm an identification. So together with verifiable credentials, DIDs can produce a trustworthy way to show a proof of license where applicable. So let's talk about the different types of DIDs that there are. Decentralized identifiers can be used in either public or private context. A public example is when a DID is used to issue something like a verification credential, like a passport. The identifier and credential are basically just stored in a public blockchain ledger, so anyone can see them and then verify that the owner has a right to, for example, travel internationally. And a really nice thing about verifiable credentials on such a public ledger is zero knowledge proof. And this basically means that the public has accessible proof of license to travel, and it doesn't necessarily show any other information that would typically be on a physical passport, things like, place and date of birth. Really, only the proof itself that's needed is accessible. So essentially, the blockchain can't be changed, and it keeps this permanent record of who's accessed it, and that really provides that increased transparency. The other type of DID is a private one, which creates a secure channel that no third party has access to. So unlike with logins through intermediaries, no one is collecting metadata and using it to target you with ads or anything like that. Parties can use private DIDs as channels for communication or a transmission of sensitive data without their use being monitored. So you might be wondering, really, what advantages can a DID offer in the first place? It's really a secure digital identification that's an alternative to A, a physical identification card, and B, any other centralized online credential process. These are some of the improvements that it can bring over these methods. So when we look at it in comparison to a physical card, there's the obvious. There's less stuff to pull out or fall out of a wallet. It's much less of a hassle trying to make sure that you have it with you. It can't get lost or stolen. There's just more control over, what elements on that identification that you're sharing, less material waste, and it's just a modernized online transmission where really you don't have to scan, you don't have to email, anything like that. In comparison to a centralized credential checking, there's no intermediary to go through, no metadata collected, there's more privacy and really just more control over your own data, which is really important. Ultimately, a decentralized identifier is just great for secure credential transmission. As the marketing research group Forrester said, decentralized digital identity is not just a technology buzzword. It really does promise a complete restructuring of the currently centralized physical and digital identity ecosystem into a decentralized and democratized architecture. Basically, what they're saying is by decentralizing the location of identifying data, power is taken away from these big intermediaries and given instead to the data holders or the people themselves, which truly is a noble cause worth pursuing further in the technology realm. And as it is right now, it's still a burgeoning practice. But as it becomes better known and more widely used, we will gain better control of our identifying information far more than we ever have before. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and learned something new about what a DID is. We'll see you next time.